passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. And OMTimes, they're trying times, they're interesting times, they're confusing times, and for many they are scary times. But what I would like to say to you right up front, first of all, here from the Dr. Kevin Show, is a little Om 3 times a day will make all of those times a little more bearable, a little more joyful, a little bit more centered. In a few minutes, we're going to be bringing Rob Stewart on, who will be doing planetary influences. Unfortunately, Lori is a little under the weather, just a little under the weather. No COVID going around or anything there, but she's a little under the weather, so she's not going to be joining us tonight. But I know that Rob and I will do a 2-man soft shoe and keep you entertained here on the Dr. Kevin Show with lots of astrological information. Do remember, we are a live call-in show, so you can call in with your questions, astrological or otherwise, to 202-570-7057, 202-570-7057. Before we do move into the astrology part of the show, there are a couple of things I'd like to share, and I do have Rob on the line, and I'm going to include him into any comments or things he'd like to share. The first thing is that you can also comment on this show or ask questions through going to facebook.com/mydrkevin, MYDRKVIN. As I always remind you, if you come to the page, like it, because I'm a likable guy. I figure if I say that often enough, you'll believe it, whether it's true or not. But actually, I really am. But besides that, on tonight's show posting, which will be pinned to the top of the page for the next few days. At some point it will get replaced, but I'm going to pin it to the top of the page. There are 2 charts that I posted, and one is a comparative symptom chart. And I know many of you may have tuned in going, boy, I'm so glad that I'm going to hear about something about the coronavirus or COVID-19 or that or whatever nickname you have for it. But as I put in the comments to both the charts that I posted for you, knowledge is power. And head in the sand is not going to be helpful. Denial is not going to be helpful. Panicking is not going to be helpful. Paranoid is not going to be helpful. Playing with hypochondria is not going to be helpful. And unfortunately, I've heard less than pleasant stories from more than one person of people like losing it in public or getting into fights or accusations because they're scared. They're scared. Just like when you have a wounded animal that's in the corner that's scared, people's worst sides come out sometimes. Now, for some people, their best side comes out. For some people, I've noticed a lot of more courtesy in the last couple of weeks, a lot more nicer comments that might be from 6 feet away, but it's still a nice comment, or it's a smile. It's kind of like we're in this together. And there's a lot of that out there, too. But we're going to have to walk around and know that for some of these people, they really are scared. Maybe they have a loved one that's part of the group that does not fare so well. Maybe they may look perfectly healthy, but they may have something that compromises their immune system, and they're scared. And we don't want anyone scared. We just want them knowledgeable. We want them powerful, and we want them making the best decisions for themselves, to stay healthy and to not mistakenly end up with the nickname of being Typhoid Mary or Typhoon George or Typhoon Henry or Typhoon whoever, because they passed it on to many people before they realized it, because they thought if they just ignored the symptoms that maybe it wouldn't be true. Please do not do that. In this first chart, it is a symptom checker. It tells you the symptom and what's a coronavirus or COVID, what's a cold and what's a flu. I wish this actually had an analogy. We are in allergy season right now. There are people out there that are starting to get allergies, and they may just have an allergy. And when they get them every year at this time of year, and they're getting them now, don't be paranoid. But as always, be cautious. So it goes over fever, fatigue. The chart, I'm not going to go to it. If you are interested, the chart will stay on. I put it on all of my pages. I put it on my personal page. I put it on my Dr. Kevin page. It's there. It's under tonight's show. You can go and look at it. It's a good chart. But at the beginning, it may ease your conscience. You know, you may sneeze, or you may hear somebody sneeze. And sneezing is not part of the coronavirus, nor is it part of the flu. But it's common for a cold. You know, and that's just an example. So knowledge is power. The second chart I have put on is a picture I grabbed that answered some coronavirus questions about the stability. And again, knowledge is power. It can last up to 3 hours in the air, 4 hours on copper surfaces, 24 hours on cardboard, 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel. 2 to 3 days. And again, this is not to scare you, but for you to stay cautious and aware and knowledgeable for yourself, for your loved ones, and to, you know, take these charts, share them, print them out. Just be aware of them. Be cautious. We are far from over from this. Also, I need to talk about don't buy in, you know, I hate to say this, and I know some people are going to say, hey, Dr. Kevin, OMTimes is a spiritual-based show. You're a spiritual catalyst. You're one of the good guys. How could you say something so horrible? But I'm going to say something really horrible. So be prepared. I just heard the collective sound of everybody moving closer to their speaker. They want to make sure they hear it. Do you notice how that happens? So, like, we have a pastor who is doing church services for over 1,000 people, elbow to elbow, crowded together, saying, oh, well, this is God's hospital, and you won't get it here, and we're saved, and we're protected. So, you know, one of the biggest tolls of is fatalities from COVID in South Korea was from another pastor saying, basically ignoring it and bringing all of his people together in the arrogance that God would protect them. And then we have we have another religious community in New York that's a hotbed right now, and they were on the edge of knowledge, not knowledge. They didn't that I know of make any of these kind of arrogant statements. But yeah, I don't want to see anybody in that group die. But if 400 or 500 of them got sick with COVID and sued the pastor, who is bringing 1,000 people together who are all donating money for him, that money ain't going to God. He ain't throwing that collection plate up in the air and the plate's coming down empty and the money is gone. It's going in his pocket. And the same thing to these bar owners who say, you can't force me to close my bar. It's unconstitutional. This is deep state. Okay? It's not deep state. These numbers are increasing, and due to the arrogance and narcissism of our White House, our current president, we are 12 weeks behind a curve that we should have been on top of. When it first started spreading in China, we should have reconvened that organization that we never should have let go of that was studying a pandemic and the effect in the U.S. We should have been already gearing up. We should have known sooner or later that this was very likely to come here. It is a small world, boys and girls. People travel, and germs travel with them. They don't even need to pay for an extra seat on the airline. They travel for free. Their cost comes at the other end of the travel. So I don't want anybody scared, but I want people aware, and I want them properly aware. And I want them to not listen or not support or not promote these kind of lunatics. You know, I heard somebody say, and I had to laugh, and there was a little part of me that thought, oh yeah, wouldn't that be nice? If just some of the stupid people, if the coronavirus just hit the stupid people really hard, that made comments like this. And these comments came from our White House to start with, from a man who called it a hoax, who was afraid it would make his numbers look bad, so he suppressed them. He interfered with us doing stuff early on because he didn't want it to interfere with him getting reelected. So I just want you to be realistic. I don't want you to be scared, but I want you to be respectful. I want you to be knowledgeable. I want you to make good decisions. And I don't want anybody listening to this show tonight, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year from today, having regrets because they know that their irresponsibility led to somebody else's death who maybe wasn't as healthy, maybe wasn't as young, maybe had a compromised immune system. Maybe it is a family member, maybe it is a loved one, a friend. It might even be somebody that you don't really know, but your arrogance killed them. Your arrogance killed them because you didn't take the proper precautions if you were starting to show signs. You didn't self-contain. You didn't do the things that we need to do to get on the other side of it. Americans are an arrogant lot. We always have been. Part of our charm. But right now it's not charming at all. And so here on the Dr. Kevin Show, we cannot encourage you enough. Take no risk. Maybe it's not your life, but it could end up being somebody else's. And as far as I'm concerned, this president has blood on his hands. There are deaths that have happened and are going to happen because of his choices to sit on this and to worry more about his numbers than what was best for the American people. So, that being said, and again, we are inviting comments and conversation, and we are now going to turn it over to Rob. Rob, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? Is COVID a hoax?
Hey, Dr. Kevin. Hey, thanks for having me on again.
Hey, I'm stuck with you monthly now. I mean,
yeah.
You're like my version. If I was a woman, you'd be my period. You know.
Well.
So.
Yeah. Well. So yeah. I mean, obviously.
How do I recover from that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
On that note, yeah. But I mean, yeah. Obviously, these are unprecedented times, and you know, from that astrological standpoint, you know, much of this dates back to this Saturn-Pluto conjunction we had earlier this year. And we talked a lot about that on the show in December. I think it was December 26th or so, about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which occurs about every 35 years. And every time there's a Pluto-Saturn conjunction, there's tremendous challenges. There's deep and permanent transformation in the world. And it's sort of like a shedding of layers and a digging beneath the surface. And you know, some of the highest tests of morality for those in authority have occurred during those Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. And we talked about this in this show back a few months ago. But I'll just go over just really quickly the past three of these conjunctions, and we can kind of relate it to today. In 1914 was, if you go three conjunctions back, it was in 1914, which was right at the outbreak of World War I. that conjunction was in the sign of Cancer, so there's a lot of protectiveness and distrust. And, clearly the world was changing, and there was massive shifts and transformation that occurred on a permanent level, obviously, over the next 35 years. And then the next conjunction was in 1947, which was after the two world wars, and capitalism versus communism it was the start of the Cold War. And so that conjunction of Saturn and Pluto was in Leo, which is about, who leads. It's the royal spotlight, so to speak. And so, there was permanent changes due to that sort of restructuring, and the question, who's going to take the lead. And then in 1982, that was the most recent one. That was in Libra, and there was enormous economic recession in the U.S. and in the world. It was the greatest rates of unemployment in the U.S., and it's sort of a restructuring financially in many ways at that point. And then that leads us to now, which, the beginning of this year, the conjunction was in January, and it certainly looked for a period of time about the conflict between the U.S. and Iran, things like that. But certainly things have shifted, and here we are with this pandemic virus that's affecting the world. And so, the themes with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it's about large-scale changes. It's in Capricorn, so it's about structure and security and practicality. It's also about things outside of ourselves, like large institutions, businesses, the health system, government, things like that. So all of this makes a lot of sense. Of course, we didn't know exactly what way it was going to show up, but here we are. So,
is there any? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead.
So my first question for you, and I want you to continue because this is fascinating, and I would be curious. So I've got 2 or 3 questions for you. This is going to be a very non-traditional show tonight, Rob. So just go with it. I'm glad you're a go with the flow kind of guy. And if you're not, you'll become one being here on the Dr. Kevin Show. Go with the flow, man. That's right. Because water always wins sooner or later. That's what I say. Because there's a lot of people looking back at the Spanish flu, which was a huge killer. I think it killed like 3 million people. And that was in 1918.
Right.
And so I was curious of if there was any astrology parallel from this one to that one. That was one question I had. And if it's not something that you thought of looking at, maybe before our next date, Rob, you'll check it out for me. Okay. You can bring me the answer instead of flowers. How is that? You got it. Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do with another bunch of wilted roses, really? Anyway, so that was my first. The second question is, looking at it from an astrological standpoint, is there a window that we can look at where this has started? Because I know in some astrological, things, you can look at, well, this is kind of like when it's going to peak, or, it's going to be for so long, there's some kind of shelf life to it, or some kind of, like, we know, like a Mercury retrograde is going to last from this to that. Is there anything astrologically that would give us any idea of when this pandemic may peak or how long it might last, or is it not that kind of dance in the stars, so to speak? Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And, I
I'm not quite sure about that. There's some things we'll talk about this show about some things, but the thing with Saturn-Pluto conjunction is that it makes deep permanent change. And so, in terms of this current situation, I don't know how long that will last, but in terms of the permanent change which this type of event has on society and the world, it's likely that, and we see it around ourselves today. There's these sort of swooping things, much like after 9/11, there was massive changes in the world. And this, because of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction here, the changes that occur can be sort of lasting in various ways. So, but beyond that, I'm not, not really, can't really speak to that completely right now.
So this Saturn-Pluto conjunction that hit its height in January, because, Saturn obviously moves faster than Pluto. Pluto kind of is if you have the hare and the tortoise, it's the tortoise's great-great-grandfather. Mm-hmm. And so, it being in the same degree, just in the same degree, we won't play with minutes, was like a 10-day event, more or less.
Right.
That it hung out together. And that was the initiator. And we all know Saturn just loves to go retrograde. And so it can run you over 3 times when you have a Saturn return, is how I look at it. Mm-hmm. Does it get back so that it conjuncts it again?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't come back all the way to Pluto. But right now there's other conjunctions with Pluto that that are pretty significant, and we'll talk about that today because it relates to this week and sort of everything that's going on, and that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, when we get back from our first break, we will we'll talk about what the upcoming astrology is. But different astrologers, I have my own opinion on things, and outer planets versus inner planets tends to do it. How many degrees do you consider a conjunction between 2 planets, between 2 outer planets, like a Saturn and a Pluto? What's your astrological wisdom tell you, dear boy?
From 3 to up to 5 degrees. Typically around 3 degrees. It's a tight sort of conjunction type of thing. That's what I would say.
Okay. So I'm just putting this out. At some point our break will show up, and then we'll come back and we'll spend our next segment looking at nothing but all that hard work you did to share with our audience. But it hits that 3 degree, even the 3 degree, not even 5. If you want to look at 3 degrees, it hits 3 degrees again, 3-4, right around the 3-4 mark, which is right in the middle of what you said, 3 to 5 degrees, in August of 2020, and it hangs out within that 3 degrees for the last half of August. Actually, even at the beginning of August, it's close to that. Mm-hmm. It's hanging right there. Yep. It's 4 degrees at the beginning of August. So through all of August into September, back 4 degrees, 5 degrees. If we look at 5 degrees, we pick up mid-July. If we look at 4 degrees, we're looking at So 4 to 5 degrees, end of July, August, and into September, we're going to be feeling, even if it's not a direct hit, we're going to be feeling that conjunction energy again, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And, another whole entire interesting topic is in terms of the U.S. and its birth chart. Of course, everything has a birthday, a birth time. The U.S. is reaching its Pluto return, actually, which takes 250 years about, most people, well, all people, I would assume, do not reach that Pluto return, and that's occurring here in the next couple of years. So there's a lot of transformation specifically related to the U.S. And therefore the world, because of course, the U.S. is the center of much of the financial, geopolitical aspects of the world. So yeah, these are transformative times, and I think we all know it. We can feel it, and here we are.
Oh, and fun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I don't count the true north node, 5 planets are going to be retrograde on July 4th this year, which will be the solar return chart for me and the country.
Right.
Oh, God, we're going to be doing a whole show on that, Rob. I hope you're prepared.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to
I got some time. 5
planets retrograde in my solar return chart. You're in trouble, boys. This is your fault.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh.
So anyways, so let's go ahead and move forward. I think we missed our first timing break.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what's going on, so we're going to keep moving on this. And I'm going to keep checking because I'm actually getting some comments. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
When we get back, we're going to see what is the astrology for the time of Aries. We're going into the time of Aries, right?
That's right.
Oh, boy. Be right back here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes, where we're changing the world. Wait for it. 1 ohm at a time. And here this week is Planetary Influences with Rob Stewart from Inner Center. You can find out more about Rob if you go to facebook.com/by Dr. Kevin. You can click on his website. You can see how to contact him, all that information. You just simply have to go to facebook.com/MyDrKevin, MYDRKEVIN. You can also go there to leave comments or ask questions about tonight's show. And remember, when you're there, make sure you like the page. Or you can call 202-570-7057. That's 202-570-7057, he says in his best radio voice, to call in with your question or comment. Do remember, we do Planetary Influences once a month where we look at the upcoming sign and what's going on. You can go to the Dr. Kevin Show, another Facebook page, which is called the Dr. Kevin Show. And if you find it, all the dates are listed of when Rob's going to be on and what he's going to be talking about. And if you go to mydrkevin.com and you sign up to be on my mailing list, I am starting a monthly e-zine magazine again. I've done these before, newsletters. And every month I'm going to have a link so that you can listen to the podcast of Rob's show, Rob and my show. And Lori, usually Lori, poor Lori's not feeling well today, though she's typing her little heart out, but is not on air with us, so to speak. So I'm going to be sending this out on a monthly basis. So if for some reason you can't be here at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday night, you can still listen to the show and see what's coming up astrologically on the horizon. So, Rob, what is coming up astrologically on the horizon? Do enlighten us, young man. Enlighten us.
Yeah. Well, good question. I mean, so, right. Well, so this past week, obviously, there's a lot of fireworks, to put it lightly, in the world. And so, there was a big conjunction in Capricorn. Before we get on to like the Aries themes of ahead, there's a big conjunction in Capricorn of Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto. And this is a tremendously powerful combination. Mars is assertion, it's aggression, it's defense and offense, it's conflict. Mars is about doing in the world, having an effect or an impact on things. Jupiter is expansive. It makes everything bigger. It inflates everything. So we're inflating that aggression, that assertion, that doing. And Pluto is a transformative energy. It's deep. It's about death and rebirth, about breakdown and regeneration. And so these themes, clearly, we've seen them. Not only at your grocery store, but I mean in everywhere. And so Capricorn, they're in Capricorn, which is about being mature, being realistic, being disciplined. But the Capricorn can also be controlling in building structure in life. And so, the Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, there is this sort of warrior energy with it, and that's needed to get things done. And clearly, there's been tremendous things done here in the past week or 2 weeks, whatever it's been. But Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, it's sort of like war drums, that motivate that warrior to take action. And, there's the themes of this is about bravery. It's about victory. It's about sort of soldiers marching, rallying the troops. And on sort of the negative side of that, sometimes there's the fear, there's, domination, conquering, sometimes self-righteousness, things like that. So a lot of, when these energies appear, we get the good and we get the bad. We don't just get one or the other. And so, with this energy, it's sort of the Mars, Jupiter, Pluto energy. One can go to extremes, and clearly, the society has needed to. It's with that energy, there's this able to take bold and decisive action. But there's also the potential of responding to a wrong by making another wrong, of fighting fire with fire, of headstrong warrior energy. And it's something for us all to be aware of this, this decisiveness that could, the overreaction at times. And, clearly the strong reaction has been needed, social distancing, all these things have been needed to take control of the situation. The thing is with this energy is just being mindful of that fire, fighting fire with fire. Because, as you spoke about earlier, Dr. Kevin, when decisions are made from that space of fear, it can create more fear. There can be, when we move from fear, it propagates fear. It makes, and we don't, there's not a resolution of fear in that moment when we act from it, and we all do. We're human, but and you spoke to this too earlier, Dr. Kevin, is that there's the pandemic of the virus, and there's also the pandemic of the panic, and these are two different things. The physical virus, and then the emotional, mental, spiritual panic that's been occurring. And so it's not that we shouldn't take decisive physical warrior-based action, the social distancing, the protective measures, the situation's calling for these types of things. But the question is, what is our mental, emotional, and spiritual approach to this situation? How do we approach this from a balanced mental standpoint, while also taking those physical, mature steps? And so, many of the traditional spiritual teachings, they from yoga to martial arts to, all the sort of spiritual traditions, they suggest that there's great wisdom in responding to an attack by flowing with it. And like a tree bending in strong wind, rather than building walls and protecting itself, it works with the energy of the attack, and in so doing, responds in a wise way. And so, the Mars, Jupiter, Pluto conjunction we've had this week, we've seen this all over, the news and the decisive action, and the only thing that the astrology points to in terms of being mindful of is, it can promote also bullying. It can promote that warrior sort of headstrong action that, fighting fire with fire. These are the themes to be mindful of. And so while, physical adjustments and actions are absolutely necessary, but to be aware of sort of, finding that spiritual, mental, emotional approach to it seems to be critical for us these days. So that's been the conjunction this week, and we've certainly seen it in a big way. And the other thing with Jupiter is that it's very benevolent, and it's about providing the resources in vast ways. And we've seen that, that the bringing the resources to the different places, the strong organization and the quickness with it. I mean, to some extent, I know, of course, it's arguable that it's not as quick as it should be, and I get that. But it just in terms of like in the past week, the massive changes we've seen, that all aligns with this sort of bold action that the sort of the warrior energy supported in taking. So that's all I have. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So First of all, I agree with you. I think it's interesting because I'm switching over to a bunch of online courses because a lot of in-person courses are not happening, and I'm actually getting ready to launch an online course about how to live and how to survive in toxic times. That talks about some of this very stuff and puts people through it. I think that sometimes, and I want to make sure we get the whole astrology forecast in, but I think sometimes we also have to look at the other players that we had warning of. It's like if you have a house and they warn you your foundation is settled and it will probably be okay, but if you get that once in a lifetime rainstorm, you're going to have a flooded basement. And you go, well, it's not a priority. I can kind of ignore it. Other things, and I want to take a vacation, and I want to do this, and you kind of hem and you haw, and then that once in a lifetime flood, that once in a lifetime rain comes, but it comes at the very end of spring when there's been 5 feet of snow in the back dooryard that once in a lifetime rain came on top of. And now your basement is flooded up to almost your first floor, and it's rotting the woods under your first floor. And you look at the series of things that you ignored along the way. You ignored the warnings. The weather was coming. You were told the weather was coming. You knew you had 5 feet of snow, and you were told about the foundation. You were told about the softness of the land. You were told about how climate has been so crazy. And you look at this, and we've had lots of warnings and lots of things going on that have set up this stupidity and arrogance that we're seeing by people like this minister and these bars that are staying open. I have to tell you, my very favorite comment, though, was the bars that were saying, you can't make us close. This is a deep state action. You're just trying to separate us so you can take over, blah, 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 to the governor. And her response was, and there's nothing you can do, we're staying open. And her response was, who issues your liquor license? Mm-hmm. And they all closed the next day. But anyway, but we look at this, and there's a lot of things we ignored. The desensitization that has happened by 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week media. The, the apathy, the different kind of social connectedness that technology has brought, bad social distancing from good social. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we've been ignoring for a couple of decades, looking the other way, pretending, that allowed this to get out of hand as quickly as it did. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally hear you there. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And it's at this point now that the basement's flooded, so to speak, and what the astrology is showing with this conjunction and with these energies, it's just that at this point, given everything that's occurred, good and bad, now the basement's flooded, and how do we take the physical action, but also what is our mindset? How do we calm ourselves when the basement's flooded, because the house isn't flooded yet, so to speak. So yeah, it's just taking things in a sort of a practical way as much as we can from here. Doing the best that we can.
So what else is going on astrologically before we run out of time? Because we could do the philosophy of this conversation.
Oh yeah, no, this could be a couple-hour conversation for sure. And so yeah, there's some things. I mean, we'll kind of breeze through some of it. I mean, so the sun. There's some things that I do want to speak to specifically because it relates to the sort of the big topic at hand. Everything does, of course, but. So the sun enters Aries here in a couple days on March 20th. What's today? The 19th? Tomorrow. So it enters Aries tomorrow, which is the spring equinox. And, this is the thing, this is the astrological new year. This is the rebirth. This is the spring. and there's impulse to begin, to take action, and it brings more courage, more bold action, so more decisiveness. Aries is very assertive. And so, the positives, it brings courage, bold action, decisiveness. The negatives of Aries, which we'll have a lot of in this next month ahead, is there can be egotistical and selfish and self-oriented perspectives. I'm right, you're wrong type of stuff. And so these are the things that Aries sort of brings forward. And, the ruler of Aries is Mars, and that's in Capricorn. And so which also brings discipline and endurance, and courage. And Mars is very comfortable in Capricorn. So that's a good thing. I don't know if you want to talk about the Sun in Aries, or if you want to move on to Saturn, which is a pretty big event. We have Saturn moving into Aquarius here in a couple days.
So let's talk about that, and then if we have some time, we'll give a couple of Aries highlights. But talk about that. Saturn moving, and what does that mean? It means it's out of my home Saturn placement sign.
Right. Hey, that's good. That is reason to celebrate. I mean, so a couple things. Boy, there's stuff on Aries I'd love to talk about too here. But so Saturn is leaving Capricorn and entering Aquarius on March 22nd. And Saturn is about limitations. It's the teacher. It's bringing structure and constraint, necessity, maturity. It brings challenges through building strength through tension. So it's Saturn sort of says, let's look at this. Is this thing working? Whatever this is, it can be this for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so that's what Saturn is. It was in Capricorn, which is about mastering something, building structure, bringing security. It's about where do we want success in our life. So over the past 2.5 years, it's been in Capricorn, and it's as if we've all been sort of mastering something in life, focusing on what's essential for each of us. And now Saturn's entering Aquarius, which is about putting the pieces together. It's about how do we bring the pieces together for the collective? What groups do I fit into? What groups do I not fit into? But the thing is about Aquarius is that it's about the collective. It's about collaboration. It's about unique and individual uniqueness, but also freedom. And so when Saturn is there, one could expect more social restrictions, more regulations, more restrictions on personal freedoms and unique expression. These are some themes that could come up to be dealt with, to be looked at over the next 2.5 years. It's a time that a lot of these sort of collective social humanitarianism subjects will be coming up, and also about the free flow of information. Maybe things will be looked at like, okay, what information am I getting? What source of information works for me? Those types of things. In general, with Saturn moving into Aquarius, there one could expect more of these social restrictions coming into play regarding, keeping the virus at bay, regarding new ways of social interaction, different things like that one could expect.
Great. All I can think of is how many of our basic rights got taken away by the Patriot Act after 9/11 for the good of the country. And now you're saying that we're probably going to have even a bigger attempt to limit our personal freedoms. And I say that on one hand, as I do my world famous trick of talking out of both sides of my mouth at the same time. On the other hand, I go, you have to balance the people that are too stupid to know how to behave in public or what to engage in. I get it. It pushes against my own, independence, baby. I'm all about our personal freedoms, but at the cost of what? It's just like capitalism at the cost of humanity. I mean, I'm not a socialist, but I'm not an ethically, morally corrupt capitalist either. There has to be the in-between where capitalism is done with humanity. And, and I think we're coming into this place. So we have that coming up for the next 2.5 years. We are going to feel some limitations, but that's I think that's probably going to, I think that we're going to see that happen. I think we're going to have to see it happen. I also think, and I've got a sense for a while that just like they played in the elections, that some of this creating this unstirring unrest is being taken advantage of because we have a government that won't protect us from Russian interference. They vote any attempt to do that down. And if you don't think the Russians are throwing discord into this coronavirus while they're lying about their own numbers, you're crazy.
There's a lot of the sort of information flow restriction. What do we do to help the collective, but also honoring unique individuality and freedoms? There's a lot of these themes that are going to be coming up the next 2.5 years with Saturn and Aquarius, for sure. And there's one other. There's one other thing we could talk about. And before I do, I just want to throw a sort of a shameless plug in there. I do natal charts for evolutionary astrology, which looks at the soul's path through lifetimes, the past life, current life, and looks at the soul's intention and ways of living that empowered life in your life. And if anyone's interested in that, they can find my information through Dr. Kevin's website. I just want to throw that out, since we all have time for inner work right now during these unprecedented times.
Well, hey, Rob, maybe we'll schedule you on a non-planetary influence and you can share mine with the listening audience so they can see how fascinating it is, and then they're going to all want one.
Sure. All right.
As I shamelessly volunteer myself, I'm sure Lori's going to say at any point, me too. Go ahead.
Right.
So what else is there? And shamelessly plug away.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. There's regarding Aries. So we have a new moon in Aries, March 24th, and again, Aries is about assertion, and this is sort of the astrological new year. We have a new moon, so the themes coming up. I mean, so really, really sort of set your intentions. What do you want to create the next year until a year from now? And this is the amazing thing, is that the sun and moon, which are conjunct during a new moon, they are square Chiron. Chiron is an asteroid that represents the wounded healer. It's a place where we have great sensitivity to certain things. It's a gateway to our own inner healer. We are all healers, so to speak, in some area of life, and it's really touching upon, for this next year, it's really touching upon those areas in which we are bringing healing to the world. But the thing is, being an Aries, it brings up themes of assertion versus aggression. And so there will be times where, again, we might be very sensitive to other people's assertion or aggression, or there might be times in which we are trying to be assertive, but maybe we're being aggressive, or maybe, maybe we're misunderstanding other people's assertion as them being aggressive. So there's a lot of themes around assertion that are a big part of this next year. And so, because it's square, because the moon is square Chiron, the sun and moon during this new moon is square Chiron, these are sort of some of the themes that might be coming up for healing. Things like anger, impatience, aggression, clearly those things are coming up. And we're dealing with them now, and they're here. And so, so there's a lot of sensitivities, energy sensitivities to this assertion versus aggression theme. So that's something to work with, and that we'll all have opportunities to work with now and this coming year.
Okay. So, again, come to facebook.com/MyDrKevin, and at the top you will see today's show. You will see a link to Rob at innercenter.org. That's innercenter.org. You can click and you can find out what he means by soul evolutionary astrology. Our closing comment. In the last 22 hours, there have been 4,478 new cases of COVID. There have been 51 new deaths, bringing our total to 201. We have now passed France, and we're on the heels of Germany in our crisis, climbing up the ladder as we incompetently still can't get tests out. Don't buy into the misdirection. Be careful, take appropriate risks, but don't freak out. Love and light from the Dr. Kevin Show.